After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the significance of different market forms, know about the importance of price taker assumption in perfect competition, understand how price determination is done in the short run, also understand about the long run equilibrium of a firm in perfectly competitive market. The degree to which a firm is able to alter the price of its product in the market by its own action depends upon the market form. To understand how markets behave as a whole, there is a need to understand what are the different kinds of market forms. The answer begins with the two sides of every market, that is demand as well as supply. These two components need to be combined to understand how the entire market behaves. It is also necessary for each and every market form in which we would be studying in this module, and particularly in this module we would be studying perfectly competitive market form. The competitiveness of a market depends upon the individual firm's power to influence market price. The more the power of an individual firm to influence the market price, the more competitive is the market. Market form is based on market structure but goes beyond it. First of all, let us understand the significance of different market forms. The term market structure is the concept that rests upon the type of market in which a firm operates. Market can be distinguished by the number of firms in the market and the type of the products that are being sold. The firms that produce a product or a closely related set of products constitute an industry. The market demand curve for any particular product is the collective curve gathered from the entire industry. When firms take their production and sales decisions, they need to know about what quantity they can sell at various prices. Their concern is therefore not with the market demand curve of the whole industry, but rather with the demand curve of their own product or their own firm. If a firm's manager knows the demand curve and how the cost and revenue behave, then he would be able to calculate profits much better. This would help in determining the rate of output. With this information, they could choose the optimum output that would maximize the profit. The structure of the market is in which a firm operates determines the relationship between the market demand curve for the product and the demand curve facing each individual firm in the industry. Broadly, there are three types of market forms: perfect competition, imperfect competition or monopolistic competition, including oligopoly and monopoly. Monopoly and perfect competition lie at the two extremes of the market structures, the spectrum of market structures. In monopoly, the industry contains only one firm and therefore it can set its own price without concern about how other firms behave. In perfect competition, all firms are equal, and therefore there are so many firms in the market that no single firm has the power to influence the market price for its product. Most of the real markets are somewhere in between these two extremes. Firms operate in the market structure that are either monopolistically competitive or oligopolistic. Oligopolistic markets tend towards monopoly, and monopolistic competitive markets tend towards perfect competition. Therefore, now let us look at different types of market forms. There are certain criteria on the basis of which we can distinguish between different market forms. The first criterion is the number of producers and the degree of product differentiation. The second is the part of the economy where they are prevalent. The third is the firm's degree of control over the price. Then fourthly, we have the method of marketing. Perfect competition, under perfect competition, the number of producers are clearly very many, and they produce an identical product. The financial markets and agricultural markets are an example of perfectly competitive markets. The firm's degree over the control over its price is absolutely nothing. The firms cannot control the price. Method of marketing: the marketing is through market exchange or the auction mechanism. Imperfect markets consist of monopolistic competition. Here there are many producers have a perceived difference amongst their products. This kind of market form is usually found in retail trade, and as far as the degree of control is concerned, there is some amount of control that the producer could exercise on the price. Basically, the method of marketing is through advertising and quality competition, rivalry, as well as sometimes there could be administered prices. Oligopoly. In oligopoly, there are few producers and each producer has little or no difference in the product. Some of the prominent markets where you could find such a market is the steel manufacture, chemical manufacture, automobiles, and so on. Here also they have some control, and advertisement and quality competition play an important role. As far as monopoly is concerned, this, as we said, is the other extreme, that is quite opposite to perfect competition. There is a single producer and the product does not have any substitutes, and we would typically find such a market form where the franchisee monopoly, such as electricity and water supply, and then there are certain companies which have a near monopoly. For example, Microsoft's platform, that is the operating system, and similarly there are certain patented drugs and pharmaceutical companies. The control over the price is quite extreme, and here too advertisement plays an important role. The basic features of the market forms can be summed up as follows. We have the buyers and sellers, that is that in perfect competition there are a large number of buyers, large number of sellers, and there are no barriers to entry either in terms of the sellers or the buyers. In monopolistic competition also the conditions are very similar as far as the number of buyers and sellers are concerned. In monopolistic competition, their oligopoly, what we find is that there are few sellers, many buyers, and definitely there are many restrictions on the barrier. There are barriers to entry as far as the producers are concerned. There are of course no barriers to entry when it comes to the buyers. In monopoly also the conditions are very similar. The assumptions of perfect competition, as we have just said, large number of buyers and sellers, products are homogeneous, and as we have said, industry is a defined group of firms producing a homogeneous product, and this assumption implies that the individual firm in pure competition, it is a price taker and the demand curve is perfectly elastic, infinitely elastic. Free entry and exit of firms, there is no barrier to entry. Entry and exit can take place at any time. Firms have the freedom to move in and out of industry. No government regulation. There are no regulations on industries such as tariffs, subsidies, rationing and so on. Then perfect knowledge. It is assumed that the sellers and buyers have complete knowledge and information is free and costless. Of course, there are some exceptions which we call asymmetric information. Well, this is defined as a situation where the buyers and sellers have different information about the same transaction or the same commodity that is being exchanged. It is not possible to have complete knowledge of all the relevant facts, and this is characterized in many such market situations. Now, let us understand the price taker assumption. Perfect competition is a world of price takers. A perfectly competitive firm sells homogeneous products. The firm is so small relative to the market that it cannot affect the market price. It simply takes the price as given, just as the consumer must generally accept the price. The consumers are charged a given price, and the producer accepts whatever they get in the form of revenue from the market. We can depict a price taking perfectly competitive firm by examining the way the demand looks in a perfectly competitive market. It shows that the contrast is there between the industry demand curve, which is DD, and with the competitive industry, which is populated by firms which are small relative to the market, and therefore we have a firm which has a segment of the demand curve, only a tiny segment of the entire demand. Graphically, the competitive firm's portion of the demand curve so small that the firm's demand curve looks like a completely horizontal line which is parallel to the x-axis. Its elasticity is infinite. Because the competitive firm cannot affect the price for each unit sold and each extra unit sold, that is the average revenue as well as the marginal revenue, would be the same. And so, for example, if at the market price the price is rupees 40 per unit, then each additional unit can also be sold at rupees 40. Therefore, the average revenue as well as the marginal revenue are both equal. Here, the major points to remember are that under perfect competition, there are many firms each producing an identical product and each too small to affect the market price. The perfectly competitive firm faces a completely horizontal demand curve. The extra revenue gained from each additional unit sold, which is marginal revenue, is therefore equal to average revenue or price. Let us now derive the short run equilibrium of a producer under perfect competition. The price of the product sold in a perfectly competitive market is determined by the interaction of the industry short run supply curve and the market demand. None of the individual producers can influence the market price significantly. The collective actions of all the firms in the industry and the collective actions of all the consumers together do ultimately determine the equilibrium price in the industry. This occurs at a point where the market demand and the market supply intersect each other. Therefore, the market demand is a summation of the individual consumers' demand curves, and the market supply is a summation of the individual suppliers or producers' supply curves. At the equilibrium point, each price, the price gets the firm gets, and the firm is forced to produce and sell the quantity at the same price, and this price has to be equal to the marginal cost. Therefore, the equilibrium condition is that marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. But because price equals AR equals MR, therefore, price which is AR is also equal to MR, and which is in turn equal to MC. Therefore, we have the equation AR is equal to MR is equal to MC is equal to price. While MC is equal to MR or MR is equal to MC, equilibrium under any market form, but under perfect competition, in addition they are also equal to AR on the one hand, that is AR is equal to MR, and MC is equal to, that is marginal cost is equal to price. Given the fixed inputs, all the firms are maximizing their profits and so have incentives to alter have no incentive to alter their output in the short run. Because the total quantity demanded equals the total quantity supplied, there is no reason for the market price to change. Thus, the market and all other firms in the industry are in short run equilibrium. Figure, we see that there is a downward sloping demand curve D1 and an upward sloping supply curve S1, and the intersection of these two gives rise to the price P bar and the quantity Q bar. These are the market price, market demand and the market supply, and under equilibrium market demand is equal to market supply. Now, this price P bar is borrowed and it applies to each individual firm. Let us first consider a condition where the cost curves are lower. When the cost curves are lower, what you could notice is that when marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue at point E, where there is equilibrium, the average cost is XEB, and the difference between the two being the difference between average revenue and average cost is the profit per unit. And if we multiply this profit per unit by OXE, which is the equilibrium quantity, then the shaded area shows the supernormal profits. On the other hand, in the third diagram, we have a set of short run marginal cost and short run average total cost, which are U-shaped. Now, if we look at the price P bar, but because the cost curves are higher, what happens is under equilibrium, when marginal cost is equal to average revenue, and at this point the average cost is higher at C. Therefore, CE refers to the per unit loss. Now, if we multiply CE with the total output OXE, then we find the shaded area, which can be defined as FCE P bar, and this shaded area tells us the loss. Now, therefore, in the short run, it is possible that both things could happen even while trying to maximize profit. When MC is equal to MR, then we actually do not know whether this equilibrium condition is giving rise to supernormal profits or it is giving rise to losses. So, therefore, there are three possible conditions. The first condition is that the cost curves are relatively low, so there is supernormal profit. The second condition is that the cost curves are high, therefore there are losses. And the third condition could be that the average cost curve exactly touches the price or the AR function. Under such conditions, because AR is equal to AC, therefore there are normal profits. Please remember that within AC we have an element of normal profit. If AC is equal to AR, it does not mean that it is a condition of no loss and no profit. It is a condition where the producer is getting an element of normal profit which is included within the average cost. Now let us derive the long run average cost curve. The long run average cost curve comes into being whenever there is a need to adjust the plant size. When we reach the minimum point of one short run average cost curve and that cost curve starts to rise. When it begins to rise, then what happens is it is more profitable to move to a larger plant size because the cost is likely to decline because of economies of scale. Therefore, what happens is that there is a constant sliding tendency wherein the long run average cost curve, which is a envelope curve which just touches each of the short run average cost curves generated by each of the plants of different sizes. Now, this long run average cost curve initially goes on declining, and this is known as an envelope curve because it is just tangential to each of the short run average cost curves, and this continues up to a point where the long run average cost curve becomes horizontal. This is the point at which the long run average cost is the minimum. Beyond this, what will happen is that each new short run average cost curve begins to rise after the optimal point. When it begins to rise, the long run average cost curve is once again tangential to the set of short run average cost curves, but this time it is tangential from the right. That is, that as the short run average cost curves go on increasing, then we have a long run average cost curve which is also increasing. All of these have been depicted together, and you could notice that at different prices, accordingly what happens is that as the supply expands in the market for a given demand function, the price would keep falling. So, the size of the firm also could expand so long as that the long run price falls. Therefore, it is possible to start with the price is P1 which is equal to 12 and the price goes down to P star which is equal to 6. At this point, what happens is that the plant which is of the optimal size has a short run average cost curve and a short run marginal cost curve, both of which are just touching the price P star. At this point, what do we notice? The long run average cost curve, the short run average cost curve and the short run marginal cost curve are all coinciding at the minimum point of the long run average cost curve. Therefore, the output which is being produced out of a plant whose size is optimal, which produces the lowest cost, is the optimal plant size. Therefore, what happens in the long run is that the long run marginal cost is equal to long run average cost is equal to the long run price. Therefore, a firm adjusts its plant size such that we have this lengthy equation which says that SMC is equal to LMC is equal to LAC which is equal to LMC, which is again equal to price, and which is ultimately equal to the marginal revenue. Therefore, in the long run, what happens is that the price is exactly tangential to the long run average cost curve at the minimum point, and this is the optimal level of production. And here all these curves are smoothly balanced with respect to each other. And in the industry, now let us see what happens. At the industry level, there is a constant influx and outflux of firms. Why does this happen? This happens because entry and exit are allowed. There are no barriers to entry or exit in a competitive firm, in a competitive market, and therefore what happens is that those firms which are reaping supernormal profits would attract other firms into the industry. As this happens, there are more and more firms which are coming into the industry. What would be the consequence? The consequence is that the supply function expands to the right. When the supply function expands to the right, then the market price falls, as we have seen in the previous case, from 12 rupees to 6 rupees. When this happens, then the supernormal profits which were obtaining earlier, which is the difference between a higher price and a relatively lower cost, vanish because the price keeps coming down. Theoretically speaking, all firms therefore in the long run would be making normal profits only. Incidentally, at this stage they are all operating at the most efficient level of output. Now, let us consider the consequence of perfect competition. Perfect competition can be judged on the basis of Pareto optimality. A situation is defined when Pareto optimality makes it impossible to make anyone better off without making someone worse off. Pareto efficiency is reached when it is not possible to improve the welfare of one agent without reducing the welfare of another agent. Therefore, there is an optimal allocation of resources. In every competitive economy, there is Pareto optimality or Pareto efficiency. At such a point, what happens is that the market mechanism allocates scarce resources in such a way that the entire market or economy is poised efficiently. The Pareto efficiency is associated with economic efficiency, but not necessarily with equity or fairness. Pareto optimality may not be socially desirable. For example, in an economy based on slavery, maybe we have Pareto optimality, but this is definitely not a desirable state of affairs. However, normally society may achieve Pareto efficiency and perfect resource allocation by the appropriate initial redistribution of the resources as well as free trade along with it. What are the requirements of Pareto efficiency? There are three conditions. The first condition is production efficiency. Production efficiency is maximized given the resources and the technology available. This means that given the resources available, the production of one good cannot be increased without reducing the production of another good. Exchange efficiency. The social welfare is maximized given the availability of resources. This means that whatever the goods produce, they go to the individuals who value them the most, who are willing to pay the most for them. This is exchange efficiency. Product mix efficiency or total efficiency is where the goods and services produced correspond to those which are desired by individuals and are produced in the most efficient manner. Firms have to be competitive in buying all the inputs, that is the productive inputs, at the lowest possible price and use these inputs to maximize production and sell out at those lowest possible prices to remain in business. Competition minimizes the costs and maximizes production. This is productive efficiency. As far as consumers are concerned, consumers acquire goods and services at the lowest possible price and thus are able to maximize their utility as well as optimize their consumption with their given preferences and budget constraint. This is exchange efficiency. Hence, both production and consumption are maximized within the constraints imposed by the available resources. In perfect competition, where perfect competition exists, and it ordinarily is found in many places in the economy, under such conditions there are economy-wide production and consumption advantages, and both production and consumption as well as utility and welfare are maximized, and therefore when we cannot improve anything further than what it is known as a condition of general equilibrium. Since all producers and consumers face the same set of prices and no rearrangement of either production or consumption is possible, and that will not in any case increase the economic welfare. So, for a given set of production conditions and consumer preferences, the Pareto optimal condition is a general equilibrium condition which maximizes everything in terms of utility, production, economic welfare and so on. The Chicago wheat market is assumed to be one of the major examples of a perfectly competitive market. Now, let us summarize what we have studied. The term market structure refers to the type of market in which the firms operate. Markets can be distinguished by the number of firms and the number of buyers and the type of product they are selling. Broadly speaking, there are three market forms: perfect competition, monopoly on the other end, and in between we have monopolistic competition as well as oligopoly. In perfectly competitive markets, the basic market structure is such that it is somewhat theoretical or hypothetical, although it is purported to be the most ideal form of the market, and there is a complete absence of any kind of collusion in the market. The market demand for the whole industry and the market supply of the entire industry put together, they give rise to a level of the price which gives us the maximum output. The demand curve of the individual firm is horizontal. However, when we add up all the demand curves and the supply curves, we have a downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve. The purpose of a perfectly competitive producer, the objective of a perfectly competitive producer is to maximize profit when marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Under short run, it is possible that different firms have both supernormal profits as well as losses. There may be some firms which have normal profit. In the long run, because entry and exit are free, therefore there are new firms coming in, the supply expands, the price level goes down, and the long run average cost curve is an envelope curve which touches all the short run average cost curves. It is U-shaped, and at the minimum level of the long run average cost curve, we have the optimal long run output. Under such conditions, the long run average cost is equal to long run marginal cost is equal to the long run that is the long run price. All of these are equal.